My name is Stephen Long, and I host a show here on Rock Candy called Sacred Tension, the podcast about the spiritual discipline of asking questions. We cover topics from LGBT issues to faith and doubt and mental health. We talk to biblical scholars and have conversations about religious abuse and leaving faith and finding it again. We also talk to pastors and skeptics and cult experts who are all sorting out their own journey of faith. Please join me in these conversations on Sacred Tension right here on Rock Candy.
Welcome to the 11D Life podcast.
What's up, 11D family, and welcome to the very last 11D Life episode of the year 2018. This has been an amazing year for us, an amazing year for our band, and an amazing year for the 11D Life community. All of you guys that are a huge part of our band and the songs that we share and the vibe that we're creating here and family and community with Rock Candy and 11D and kind of all things belonging to that multiverse. I hope that you have some amazing Christmas plans ahead of you and that you are all gearing up for safe travels during this holiday season. Now, before we close out this year, I want to let all of you guys who are a part of the 11D community know just what you're responsible for over this past year. This has been the most amazing year for our band to date. At the end of 2017, we released a brand new album. You guys completely floored us with your response to it. We have never felt more loved and cared for and supported literally in the history of our band being a thing. So just a little bit of a rundown of what you guys are responsible for. You gave us over 1 million streams just this year alone. There are 159,000 of you out there just listening on Spotify. You listen to 80,000 hours of our music, which I don't know how you're not suffering from brain rot. And you guys are all over the world. You're in 65 different countries. So I just want to say from me, from everybody here at the label at Rock Candy, and from Davey, who can't be here today for today's episode, I just want to give you guys a huge podcast hug. So wherever you are, whatever you're doing, just imagine us creepily reaching through your audio playback device and loving you. Hey, guess what? We also have some brand new members to 11D Life that I want to take a minute and welcome personally. Amber Marie, welcome. Chastity Douglas, you are brand new on here. You just joined a week ago. Squid Tea Garden, hi. How are you? Jonathan Howley in Ontario. Caleb Folks joined about 2 weeks ago, and he's a music teacher. You could probably teach me a thing or two on guitar, pal. Carrie Ackerman is a part of the group now. Josh Guys White, Hannah Simpson, Billy Glanville. It looks like Crystal Dean joined about 3 weeks ago. She is a super fun and cool 11D fan or Jelly Rocks fan. Welcome to all of the newcomers. We are so happy that you are here and a part of this community, a part of what we're doing. And hey, we're going to have some fun together. 2019 is going to be even better than what this year was. And for everybody who is in the middle of formulating your New Year's resolutions, we are right alongside there with you. So if you have a resolution for us, because it's just way too much work to make resolutions for yourself, if there's something that we can be doing better, if there's something that you want to see from 11D, from the Jelly Rocks, from Rock Candy, if there are artists that you want to see Rock Candy put out in 2019, if there are things that you want to put on our radar, if there are merch items that you want, please let us know and we will seriously make them our New Year's resolutions, because you guys are literally the fuel that makes this thing go. So anything that we can do to make you feel more like a unicorn, let us know, and we will get on it. Today on 11D Life, I get to hang out with Chris Moon from the website Noisetrade. They are an aggregate for a whole bunch of new talent, and they have a really cool way of connecting artists with their fan base in a really unique way. So you guys have probably heard about this company before. You've probably had somebody share some music from them. So I get to sit down with Chris and we take a super deep dive into his experience within the music industry, what Noisetrade is all about, and kind of what they do and how they're servicing artists right now in 2018, 2019. He's also an artist manager. And I think that if you are one of those up-and-coming singer-songwriters/bands that really enjoys listening to the show, this is going to be a really cool experience for you to kind of hear firsthand what the inner workings of an artist management or manager's brain is, and sort of what they're thinking about on a daily basis, and how they're viewing the music industry and the careers of the artists that they're working with. It's a super, super informative conversation. So anyway, huge hugs to everybody who is following 11D7 on Spotify. We cannot thank you guys enough for that. You have made 2019 an amazing year. Sorry, 2018. You have made 2018 an amazing year for us, and we can't thank you enough. I literally can't. I can't thank you enough. There are too many of you out there to thank individually. I'm wishing you guys all an amazing holiday season, and I hope that you enjoy this very last 11D Life episode of 2018. Love y'all. Skype is so weird. It gives you like 3 or 4 different video screens, or at least for me, like pulls up 3 or 4 different video screens, and I'm like, wait, are you making me pick between one or what? The most brilliant minds in the world developing these apps, and like still the user experience is a little bit frustrating at times. But we're talking to each other over the internet. I mean, we're looking at each other in different time zones. This is literally time travel happening through a laptop, and I'm complaining about the GUI.
Well, we do all want it perfect all the time. That's kind of the norm today. So
because we're used to having it perfect. Like, right. I think about that all the time. Like, everybody kind of grows up with their own set of baggage and issues and things. And when I really stop and think about all the things that are contributing to the stress in my life, or the death by a million cuts kind of things that sort of wear away at me, most of the time it's because I have these unrealistic expectations of convenience, whether it's like intellectual convenience, emotional convenience, all of that sort of gets tied in with technological convenience, because those are the kind of creatures that we are, I think. Right. And I realize that I'm miserable because I have unrealistic standards in every area of my life. And I create my own bubble of misery. I nosedived really hard into this conversation with you, Chris. You caught me at an interesting time.
It's a heavy thought for a Friday afternoon.
Yeah. Do you save your Fridays for happy thoughts?
Yeah, kind of, I guess. I try to wrap the week up on a high note. I like to kind of wind down conversations and stuff, to have a little bit of time to kind of like just wrap up the last minute things of the week and look ahead a little bit. Yeah, I think that's a good approach.
Do you have like a thing that you do on Friday that like you save for the rest of the week so that it makes Friday more special? Like it could be a special dish or a dessert, or like I'm only going to go see a movie in a theater if it's a Friday.
Yeah, I mean, I have 2 kids, so it just like there's so much stuff, so many other variables that speak into life that, outside of having pizza on Friday night, that's about it. That's about as constant as we can get.
That's so awesome. Do you remember TGIF? Mm-hmm. Okay, so that used to be like our big thing in our family growing up. Was like every Friday night. We wouldn't even call it TGIF. We just called it Steve Urkel. Like, and all the other shows were also Steve Urkel somehow. Right. and we would like make a fort, or like we would get every single pillow and blanket that we had in the house, and we would move it all to the living room because we had a small house. And my dad would go get like the budget tubs of vanilla ice cream and like a huge jar of peanut butter, and he would make peanut butter milkshakes for everybody. And that was like our Friday thing that we did. But now I don't even know what I look forward to on Friday. It's like, I know I'm supposed to look forward to it, and it excites me when it's here, but that like childlike wonder of the Friday is kind of gone. Sort of like when Christmas rolls around, you just have to, you're going to have to make conversation with family, and there's something weird and stressful about that.
No, that's true. That's true. Yeah, I mean, I think you have to look at things not necessarily through the lens of previous experiences, but what you can make of the current experience, I suppose. And it's easy to go and make it complicated or make it heavy, but it is a nice perspective to try to stop for a second and go, oh, this is actually nice. I'm not in the middle of what I'm typically doing with people I don't get to see all that often in the holiday sense. And yeah, if you can manage to switch gears in that regard, I think it can be good.
Are you already emotionally, mentally preparing yourself to sort of switch gears for Christmas? Do you have a good relationship with your family, or is it sort of 6 out of 10 kind of situation?
No, it's good. It's good. I think it's, it's definitely challenging because you get out of your routine, and that always throws me off a little bit.
Yeah.
But I do try to kind of, enjoy the specialness of the time away from the norm and make the most of that. Be it hanging out and chatting with friends or family, or doing something different with the kids, or what have you. I'm fortunate in a sense. Working in the music industry by and large across the board shuts down between Christmas and New Year's every year. And the nature of what I do at Noisetrade and the way we work is, we don't really, we can't really actively feature new artists during that time frame when everybody's scattered anyway. But we do like to see, we get a fair amount of traffic on the site over the holidays, and we want to continue to propel that. So basically we go to like a pre-programmed best of, holiday season, staff picks for the year, that kind of thing. So I work my tail off the beginning of December so I can take basically the second half of December off.
See, that's so weird because because I used to be in Nashville a lot. Because I was in a band on Sony, and so we were always talking with label people. It always kind of struck me that it wasn't just the holiday. It was straight up November through December through most of January. Nobody would return a phone call, an email, and anything. But this is weird because you're saying that you're working your ass off while this is all happening.
I'm putting together what the emails that are going to go out during that downtime between Christmas and New Year's, if you will. So we can go into kind of a pre-programmed state, but we still have to lay all that stuff out and program it and plan it and set it up and schedule it. So for me, it's a busy season coming out of Thanksgiving into December. But I can pretty much kind of completely unplug during that time frame. But my history is in artist management, so I've always worked with artists, and there is no downtime with that typically, So, I can roll with all of that, but it's definitely nice to kind of take a breath during the holidays. But I would say,
there's always a crisis with artists.
Right. There's always something that kind of pops up, that's semi-timely, but that's fine. That's part of the thrill of doing that, I think.
So are you still in artist management?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I work with an artist. His name's Ross Flournoy. He has a band called Apex Manor that's on Merge. They have a new record coming out May 31st of next year. So, but he stays really busy though, scoring. He does a lot of independent films. He wrote the theme for a show on CNN with Jake Tapper, the lead with Jake Tapper. So he's constantly, writing, co-writing, scoring, and, lots of various things to do and dig into. So yeah, it's fun.
See, this is really interesting because to me, you've already Nashvilled our conversation, because you made it about a business or about a new project or about a thing that's happening. And that was one of the things that I always found sort of weird and conflictual, because the more time that I spent in Nashville, the more it was I know this shit is really important. I know that you have to take your career seriously as an artist. But it felt like I was put in these situations where every single conversation I was having with somebody was sort of turning into a pitch, or it was like your wealth and your value as a person was only as high as what you could offer someone in the conversation, or only as big as what your last album was, and I have to imagine, this is why I really admire people like you and different companies like Noisetrade that can sort of exist within that Nashville sphere. And I'm always interested in what does that do over time? Have you found out what does Nashville look like for you? Does it feel like all business all the time? Is it slowly sucking your soul down into an abyss?
Well, I actually got out of the abyss. I moved to Minnesota 5 years ago. So
is that where you are now?
Yeah, I live in the Twin Cities. In South
that's
Minneapolis.
amazing.
So, but I can still speak to that because I was in Nashville for 21 years. And when I arrived in 92, it was, downtown was a bunch of, dance clubs and thrift shops, and the Ryman wasn't open, and we didn't have any major sporting teams. And I mean, it was definitely a different, landscape, literally, and also just creatively for that matter. So to see that kind of propel over the last 25, 26 years, I mean, it's definitely heightened, in particular, I think, in the last 4 to 5 years. Like the week I left Nashville 5 years ago, an establishment called Pinewood Social opened up, and it's a coffee shop, bar, has a bowling alley in it. They have a pool. It's very, very LA, very not Nashville.
It's very Great Gatsby-esque.
Yeah, and it's a lovely place. I mean, but I remember walking in there, having gone back a couple months later, going, "Where am I? What is this?" Like everything just kind of began. I think a lot of people use that as a touch mark too. That's when it felt like, oh my gosh, things are really shifting. There's more people here. They're coming in from LA, New York, and all over the place. And it's always been a melting pot, in that sense.
Yeah.
All the time I lived there, I only knew one. I think I've only known one person that actually grew up in Nashville. I mean, almost everybody moved to Nashville in some capacity at one point or another. It's an interesting place for sure, but I do think it's definitely, it feels a little oversaturated right now.
What is that? What does that mean? That's a bird's eye terminology. Saturated.
Yeah, it's like traffic is horrendous. Housing prices, whether you rent or buy, are just insane. I think it's in a place where Brooklyn was maybe 10 years ago or 15 years ago, where it's everybody kind of went there. It was for the coolness of it, and it's getting overpriced to the point where some of the special elements of that are getting pushed out because they aren't really able to keep up from a financial perspective. If you will. So, I mean, that is definitely a concern. I love going back there, and I love spending a bit of time there, which I'm lucky I get to do.
What's your favorite part about it? Is there something that sort of feeds your soul about being there? Is it just friends? Is it the atmosphere?
It's the people. It's really the people, more or less, and the focus on the industry component of it. There's always great music going on. There's always people doing amazing things in that market. But really, for me personally, it's the people. I could do away with, and there's a few places I like to eat and go visit, but for the most part, it's a little overwhelming. And I talk to friends that are in the midst of it there and have seen the changes too, and it's all relative to what your expectations are. I will say I'd rather be in a place or view a place like that is constantly evolving and changing versus being in a stagnant place. But I will say being in the Twin Cities for me reminds me of like the mid to late 90s when I started in the music industry. There's a great group of artists here doing a wide variety and plethora of different styles of music.
Yeah.
On a national and international level and a local level. Obviously, you've got First Avenue, which is an amazing group of promoters here in town that work in several venues that do a great job on that front. And then we have The Current, which is one of the leading non-com AAA stations here, and I'd argue probably one of the best in the nation right now, for especially for emerging artists.
See, that's awesome, and that's an FM station.
Yeah, it's a non-com AAA station. It's called The Current. It's been around for, I want to say 13 or 14 years, but it reminds me a lot of, it's not programmed the same way in a sense, but it reminds me of what, like the first time I'd hear like KCRW back in the day, or KEXP maybe, but it definitely has, those are in LA and in Seattle, and kind of legendary stations in their own right. But I think The Current is very eclectic, amazing people, and it supports this market in a way that I think few major markets have the same ability. When you put The Current and First Ave together, you can sell tickets and find an audience for an artist, and that's a pretty special thing on a local level.
That's pretty sweet.
Resonate nationally.
Yeah, like I love that sort of synergy. It still kind of begs the question in my mind, like the viability of the FM format that we've seen sort of like dying throughout the years, but that was so creatively formative for us. Like I remember discovering new bands on the radio. I mean, I remember having a tape deck and buying like cassette tapes and waiting for really cool shit to come on the radio so that I could record it onto cassette tape. That sounds completely like out there for people growing up like in the next generation or the next two behind me. But that was how hungry I was for art, how hungry I was for weirdness or for anything that was a different color in my head that I hadn't seen before. And that's what music was. But I'm still wondering, are those FM stations, like, is it really that they're on their way out and there's no stopping that? Or is that format transforming itself? Is it finding a new niche among the independent music scene and sort of figuring out a way to support the middle class musician as opposed to just being a clear channel dominated sort of thing for people? Yeah,
well, I think you have to look at two different aspects. Well, actually, there's three types of radio, if you'll follow me in a sense. I mean, there's commercial radio, which I do think is struggling for a variety of reasons, much of what you just stated. There's satellite radio, which has its struggles too, but I mean, until I guess that older demographic eventually, isn't around to support it, it's still got a good corner on the market, if you will. But I think AAA or non-commercial radio in general, community-supported radio, can survive in a way because it's not necessarily strictly about tuning into that station and listening to music as much as just having a connection with a group of people that are, very thoughtful about how they interact with that community and what they put and present in front of them. So it's not just the radio component of it, right? Like, we're chatting on November 2nd and at the Fitzgerald Theater tonight, Lowe, who's a Minnesota artist, the Blue, is playing a show, and The Current is streaming that live on Facebook and YouTube, and they do a variety of those from a couple different locations in St. Paul. And that's when you begin to step out of your own market and build a community that's broader than, your current locale, if you will. And I think that's pretty special. They go out of their way to do things like that really endear their community to them, and I think that's how they survive and thrive, to be honest. And that's a special type of relationship, a community-supported station versus a commercial station versus satellite radio, which I guess is kind of community-supported too, is through subscription in a way, you could say, but it's not that same relationship. You don't feel like you're supporting a cause, if you will. The same kind of do with commercial non-commercial radio. So I feel really fortunate that we have the Current here, and then we have First Ave too. I go to see so many more shows than I did when I lived in Nashville. Public transportation here makes it super easy to get to and from shows. The crowds here are such music loving and open-minded. It's the energy in the crowd is palpable and different than what I've really experienced, certainly here in the States.
What are they looking for? Like when you talk about this energy in the crowd, because actually, for whatever reason, for the past month, this season of 11D Life has really sort of hit on that with a whole bunch of different people, of how important that sort of human connection, that weird elevation of spirit, and that weird sort of pixie dust momentum that picks up, in the middle of live music and in a shared experience. What do you think people are looking for? Like, what would you call all of that? And is that something that just happens when the right ingredients get mixed up together, or is that something that can be facilitated through a to-do list, a creative to-do list?
Well, I think it's the grace of location, right? I mean, you're off the beaten path. Yeah. I mean, you have essentially, you have 4 seasons here, but you have 2 seasons. Well, actually, the joke is you have winter and you have construction, because they're always doing construction in the summer and traffic's horrible. Right. But in reality, you have, from like, say, April to October, it's beautiful up here. Yeah. And you want to be out and about. And then from, basically November to March, it's cold and often snowy, and, you kind of hunker down a little bit and huddle and stay at home. But, people here in general are resilient enough that eventually they want to get out and experience something. So the idea of going to a show, I think, is, and seeing live music in particular, I think really kind of drives that. So you're happy to be out of the house and have that experience for a good part of the year. I think that's some of it. I don't know, for whatever reason, there's a bit of that Minnesota nice component to it. Maybe, I don't know, but people like to go to shows here for sure. They like to be supportive, and I think they like to be, or they come in with an open mind. So I mean, even for all the years I was managing artists and they tour through the Twin Cities, I never had an artist come through here and say they had a bad show. Like it was a weird experience or whatever. It was always
in Minneapolis, is everyone, or in Minnesota, is everyone as nice as Garrison Keillor makes them out to be?
I mean, mostly, yeah. I mean, it's a really, really open community. It's not nearly as, judgmental is too strong of a word, but just skeptical, I guess, maybe, is like, Nashville could be. Like, I used to promote shows in Nashville back in the 90s. I promoted Bright Eye's first show in Nashville way back in I did 2 Elliott Smith shows, and it's a variety of different artists.
Right.
But anyway, it was because I wanted to see them come and play typically. Yeah. But the shows themselves were really hard, like getting people out. Like, even if I threw down like a $300 or $400 guarantee, I'd be sitting there counting people as they come through the door going, okay, and then people would hit me up the day of going, hey, can I get on the guest list? I'm like, it's a $5 ticket. How about you don't buy a beer and you support the band? Because if you don't buy a ticket, that all of a sudden costs me, that my ticket becomes $100 or $200
right.
by putting everybody on the guest list. But anyway, regardless of that, it was just really hard. And people would come, they stand in the back of, the crowd and hum and haw and be judgmental. And it was not fun. Nashville is not like that anymore because there's enough people there that it kind of overtakes the industry component.
Is it really not?
I think so. I think it's matured a lot over the last 5 to 10 years to where it's not as highbrow as it once was, as far as that goes. But I will say, coming into this market in the Twin Cities, I don't really ever get any of that. Like, people are out, they love it, they want to see live music, they want to experience the band, they want to catch the opening band, they're engaged in a way that I think is just kind of ingrained in what they do, and is supported by promoters like First Avenue and great venues that have great sound and is a good experience to go out to, which I think is also key. And obviously, the tipping element of that is, to some degree, is having a station like The Current kind of fuel that. So I don't know. It's a kind of a perfect storm of a small but very resilient creative community, kind of mixed with these strong business drivers that just support a really special place here that I don't, for the type of market we are, I don't know if you can really find that same kind of mixture anywhere else. I mean, I've experienced that on the road with artists in Europe, where you go to a show in the UK or Scandinavia or something, and the crowds are kind of like that. Really into it and really respectful and focused, but it's not always the case here in the States.
That was kind of eye-opening for us, because we kind of started out in the Christian music industry and then quickly realized we had made a mistake. And so, I mean,
judgmental too.
Yes. So we all of this, like, so much time sort of straddling this line between, we're like, look, we don't see any difference between our audience, whether they're Christian or not. So why did they see such a huge difference in, like, why do they care so much whether or not we are? And so it put us in this weird situation. And then we had, through like this fluke, we had this crazy amount of success for a minute in Japan, and it had nothing to do with us. It was just somebody at the label, passed a CD along, and like, it just happened that like neon punk or electro pop rock was sort of happening in Japan at that time. And we had a record that blew up and did really well there. Well, we got to go overseas and like tour with all these bands that we actually wanted to be playing shows with. like we were never stoked to be on the bill with somebody like Jeremy Camp, no offense. But it just wasn't our crowd, it wasn't our thing. We didn't have a religious agenda to push. And it was like when we're playing with like Angels and Airwaves and Newfound Glory, like overseas, we're like, this feels right. This feels good. Right. And the crowds were completely different. They were there to have a good time. It was almost like there was no pretense whatsoever. They left all of the weird sort of musical baggage that people in America, I feel like, carry around with them at the door. They just didn't give a shit. It was like, we're going to have a good time one way or the other because we're here to see this band, and we don't care if everybody sees us get excited about a band. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like our experience in Nashville was almost the complete opposite, where it's like, if we booked a show at Rocketown, we were like, we didn't know if 300 people were going to show up or if 3 people were going to show up, but we did know all of them were going to stand in the back with their arms folded and just sort of look at us like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's a weird vibe for sure. And I think, I don't know, you can't really even qualify. I mean, the Christian music industry confounds me because it's not a genre of music.
Right.
I mean, I guess arguably lyrically it is, and maybe you could, but it's not blues, it's not jazz, it's not rock. I mean, stylistically, it's not a genre of music. It's just not.
Right.
So, and you could argue there's artists that fit in the middle of all that, you know, and several obviously iconic artists have touched on this or had moments and obviously put their beliefs out into the world without having that stigma or being qualified as a Christian or whatever artist. But to me, it's just like that whole industry around it just is bizarre in a way, because it does set a pretense before you even get to the music. Typically, you know, and I think that is a disservice to the artist. It might be a benefit to the listener if they want to kind of like pigeonhole themselves and they want to hear a certain type of thing. I can appreciate that on a certain level, but I think you can seek that out in more of a secular way without it being pigeonholed into a kind of forced genre that Christian music is.
Well, it's weird. It was weird to us because
it's weird. It's such a weird vibe. Yeah. I mean, that crowd just odd by nature, which is unfortunate for artists like yourself to get stuck in that capacity. I mean, that's a whole other rabbit hole and conversation to go down. And I know a lot of friends that have a lot of opinions on that. Well, Derek Webb, who founded Noisetrade, came from that community and stepped away from it. And so it's tricky. It's a tricky thing to navigate. It's I want to call it, well, I know some people call it a ghetto, but it is hard to get out of if you're in it, and kind of cross over, if you will, into a broader fan base. But I mean, some people straddle that line. Okay.
I mean, you probably have a really great, perspective on this sort of thing. I think for our band, we're like, we really love what we're doing and we love forward motion no matter what direction it's in.
Right.
So we're like, almost have taken this approach, and everybody that listens to the podcast kind of knows this already. But we're just sort of like, we're moving away from all of that, but we're sort of taking everybody with us on the journey, because it's not just a move away from Christian music. It's for some of us, it's also a move away from Christianity. For some of us, it's also part of a creative journey to something bigger, something more meaningful. It's putting behind a lot of other stuff and sort of trying to self-actualize in front of people and bring them along on the journey via having all of these kinds of conversations. Like, yeah, the Christian music industry is weird. It's fucked up. Let's talk about it. Let's make it okay for us to feel what we felt and to see what we saw and to not be okay with it, and then to move on. Because like if we just sit here and allow the Christian music industry to become an excuse for us to not explore our own creativity and to do all the things that we love doing in the first place, like the whole reason that we got into playing music in the first place, then the terrorists win. I mean, terrorists being the Christian music industry. I'm just kidding. But
no, it's it does kind of eat itself over time. But I think I mean, my experiences, and they're very limited in the Christian music industry. My wife actually worked for a Christian label for a while. I don't know. I wouldn't. There's some good people trying to do good things for the right reasons, and then there's a lot of, oh, we're going to make this extra special, and we're going to sell. We have this community we can sell to. It's very there's I wouldn't say a dark side to it, but there's definitely a muddled element to it that kind of you don't get anywhere else in the music industry, really. And it's kind of bizarre
Yes.
to look at from the outside. And it's like, I could never wrap my head around it. But, to each their own. I mean, I'll support, personally, I like, and as a platform at Noisetrade, we like to support anything we consider to be really good.
Yeah.
And we don't make any qualifications as to what that means, as much as, hey, do I like this? Do I think other people like it? Okay. Is there, can we be a bullhorn to bring a few new people to the table based on who we have in our community? And that's what we try to find a way to do. And I will say, I do like the fact that, there's been some other people trying to straddle this in the past. Like when Pace Magazine launched, they had a similar perspective on this and tried to find a healthy balance of, baking into really good, what some people would consider Christian music, but on the fringe into more of a mainstream kind of thing. But I like the fact that, people will use our platform, use Noisetrade in a way to connect with people. And if it's definitely heavy on the religious, kind of verbiage and focal point lyrically, well, we do want to make sure that gets to the right people, and we might not go as broad to the full community.
Right.
But at the same time, we want to make sure we're not alienating anybody, but also speaking to the full community as much as possible. And there's some gray area in the middle of that. But I like the fact that we can feature an artist like Amanda Palmer on our platform, and it doesn't cause a mass exodus, in a sense, and then we can feature artists like Josh Garrels, who makes amazing, beautiful music from authentic, well, they're both authentic. Both those artists come from a very authentic place. You can love them or hate them, but you can't deny that they're worthy of at least taking a look at, and certain people gravitate towards that. And, you want to try to amplify that for the basis of the art that it is. So I think that's a neat thing that we're able to do a bit of both.
I think that's pretty cool. It's almost sort of acknowledging that a lot of the Christian audience, and this is, I've done so much thinking about this, Chris, like I'm too into it, but the desire to see so much of your worldview and your beliefs reflected back to you in the art that you consume, which was our experience, feels so counterintuitive to what I've found the purpose of art to, or the actual power of art to be, is that it's not reflecting, like the parts that I relate to are the parts that get, that I see of myself and other things, but the parts that keep me moving forward and keep me questioning, keep me thinking, and keep widening my worldview and widening my bandwidth of color that I'm able to see are the things that I don't agree with, are the things that make me uncomfortable, are the things that sort of make me squirm a little bit, and they make me ask myself, why are you squirming right now? Like, that, to me, that's the powerful thing about it.
Right. Well, I mean, I think that, again, not to go too deep down the rabbit hole, but I think a lot of, at least organized religion, speaks to having the answer but not posing the question. So it doesn't really, it doesn't really allow for as much of a dialogue to occur. They don't want you to necessarily experience or see or engage with the things that, quote unquote, make you uncomfortable out of, I don't know, some fear of being corrupted by it. I don't even know. I don't even understand that perspective.
So did you grow up religious, or what was your experience with that?
I grew up Catholic, and I went to church and did all that, and I stepped away from it from a long time, and as I got older and started a family, and thankfully my wife and I both felt like that was a important anchor, and we found a really great church in Nashville at an early stage that really spoke to us, and that kind of pulled us back into that realm in a good way. The community I belong to up here in Minneapolis, it's called Fabric now, but it used to be called Jacob's Well, but the whole concept of it was church for people who don't like church. And I that in of itself you could unpack in different ways, but I mean I think it kind of strips away some of the preconceptions of some of that, but gets to the heart of it, and that's something I can appreciate certainly as a person. And I think it's important when you raise kids too, to kind of give them some structure around that. So they're asking those questions and not being confounded by it, and also not being overrun by it too. That was my biggest, I think, issue with Catholicism, growing up Catholic, is, I watched and saw in my tenure growing up in school how quickly they kept pushing down confirmation to a younger age. And I'm like, I didn't understand what I was doing at that point in time.
Yeah.
My life, and I felt like that was really unfair. But I have a brother-in-law that converted to Catholicism and is now becoming a deacon, and he's old enough and mature enough, obviously, an amazing individual, that he can focus on that and make those choices for himself. I didn't think that I could at that age, and that really bothered me, and still bothers me, that's kind of a norm in trying to make those things happen. I would say, kind of flipping it away from religion for a second, when it comes to stuff that makes you squirm and whatnot.
Yeah.
In general, and raising kids, I mean, I want my kids to be exposed to things at a time where they can digest them, but I don't want to hide too much from them, in a sense that I think they need to be aware that this exists, and some of it might be really enticing, but it might not be necessarily, nurturing, or stuff that you might need to maybe partake in, in small doses, in moderation. But either way, being exposed to that element, I think, is really important. I mean, my kids are only 9 and 11, so they're still a few years off from this.
Yeah.
But I remember being 14, 15 and listening to like Neil Young and Lou Reed and artists like that, I listened to Lou Reed's New York record when it came out in 88, I think. Yeah. And I would have been 14 or 15 at the time. And it's like, I didn't know a lot of what was going on that record, but I loved unpacking it, and I love talking about it with people and understanding it, Yeah. There's a lot of dark elements in there, but it's important to be able to be exposed to that and ask questions, as opposed to brushing it under the rug or acting like it doesn't exist.
Yes.
I don't know, especially with art, I think it's important. Like, my son's 9 years old, and he's way into like Frankenstein and Dracula and, warlocks and a lot of this like classic, but yet kind of, it's appropriate for a 9-year-old.
So he must have had like the best time this Halloween. This is like sounds totally up his alley. Oh,
totally. But the thing is, I'm just really like, I kind of worry. I'm like, okay, but like when you become 12, 13 years old, what do you get into? Because it's not like he's going to jump ahead into like It or Halloween or whatever.
Chris,
or
he's going to become a goth. He's going to go through his goth phase.
Maybe so, but there's certain things that's like, you can't, there's no like middle ground there. It's like, and so I don't know, I'll show him The Shining maybe when he's 14, and maybe that'll steer him in a certain direction. Appreciate good elements of horror and filmmaking, but it confounds me a bit, but I'm also really fascinated by it, because I wasn't that way as a kid. Well, I read a few Stephen King books when I was young, but yeah. Anyway, all that to say, it's just really interesting. There's certain things like that it would be really easy to go, no, you really shouldn't be paying it. No, don't get into that. You don't want to pay attention to that. But the reality of it is like, well, yeah, be aware of it, experiment a little bit with it, and decide for yourself within reasons and boundaries and considerations. It's I think it's better to be aware as opposed to be shut off from whatever in life on a certain level. So
that's really interesting, because as you talk about your kids, this sounds like something really important to you. Like it sounds like you spend a lot of time thinking about like how to throttle, the world coming at your kids. And I think everybody sort of does that according to how they grew up. They take all the weird shit that happened to them growing up, and they create new funnels, for their kids. And sometimes they're great. Sometimes it's overkill. But we're all the product of extremes to some degree.
Yeah. Well, I hope it's not a throttling as much as just a platform for discussion and understanding. I'd much rather be at a place where they can experience certain things at certain moments in their life where it's, hopefully appropriate. There's some things you can't see at a certain age and digest effectively. But as, you unfold your life, you get exposed to a broader sense of reality. And some things are good, some things that aren't necessarily good for you, and vice versa and whatnot. I think the underlying thread, I would hope, as a parent, or really for anybody, is just let's have an open dialogue about that. What's not healthy about this, or what's this about? What's this mean? I remember watching and seeing U2 on Live Aid, and when they play a song like Pride or Bad, it's like I didn't know what that was about, but it piques your curiosity. It's a moment of art that you deem yourself interested in enough to ask questions about. I think what more could you ask for out of beyond the realm of just pure enjoyment of what the art is, but when it raises questions that you can ponder and dig into and unravel, that's a pretty beautiful thing.
Chris, is that why you're still here? Is that why you're still in the music industry? Because we talk about this so often on the podcast, and there is sort of this common thread, this recurring theme of the different people that we talk to. It's like they love being a part of a community that constantly has something to say, has an idea to express, has iron to sharpen iron. And in a way, I feel like everybody sort of expresses the sentiment in one form or another that they love being a part of the forward motion of humanity. It's like a shared form of therapy to sort of be as weird and fucked up and kind of subversive as a lot of the music industry can be. There's an awful, horrible, nasty, mean side to it, and it is ruthless. It's hard, but there's also this incredibly kind, loving. It's the extremes of humanity, I feel like, on display for everyone to see. It's all the weirdness. It's all the sterilized stuff. It's everything all at one time. I wonder what that's like for you. Would you still be in the music industry? Like, are you here because you found that you have a temperament for it and that you just feel really good at the networking, the day-to-day, the making things happen for people? Or is it that you feel this connection and that those sort of emotional drives really are important to you and you feel fulfilled in that way?
Well, yeah, it's a combination of all that. I think your characterization is more of a subconscious component to it. I don't know. There's a practical element of it, is like, hey, this is what I love to do. This is what I find myself doing. It fits my temperament. I think I'm pretty good at it. Yeah. And it's, I'm 45 years old, so I've been doing it for 25 years now. So it is kind of what I do, for better or for worse.
Right.
You cobble it together and make it work when you're trying to kind of call it a profession and raise a family. But I feel like it does energize me, more than anything else I can think of. Music in general has always been that driver for me personally. I found at a very young age it could change my mood in a heartbeat. It could level me or excite me or drive me in a way that nothing else really did. Yeah. I do like being around the creative element of it. I like, I wouldn't say that I feel the need to be on the front end of it and be this kind of hipster character. That's not me at all. Yeah. But I do love discovering stuff early on and seeing the potential in it and seeing it kind of blossom in a way. I love playing a role in whatever element that is, and in whatever way I can, to be an evangelist, if you will, for great art. So much of it is interpersonal and just.
What if that were your? Is that a fitting tombstone for you? Not to fast forward to your death so quickly, Chris.
Wow.
The art.
No, but
what did you just say? As something of art. How did I lose this? It's because my headphones were messing up.
No worries. Yeah, I don't even.
Ambassador of art or something?
Oh no, I just like to be an ambassador of really good things. Yeah. I think, I can say this honestly, for all the artists I've worked with on the management side, I've had a passion for. They've been amazing people, first and foremost. Yeah. I always say that if I'm going to work with an artist in that capacity, I got to, it's got to be the kind of thing where I'm waking up at 3 a.m. thinking of ideas about it. Yep. I have to be engaged and really interested in it, both personally and also have creative ideas about it. Otherwise, it's just punching a clock, and that's not a lot of fun.
Right.
For me, it's not enough to do the hard work, if you will, of moving something along. That said, I love that I've kind of evolved into a place where in running Noisetrade in the way that we do, in the way we kind of champion artists, we can do that on a broader scale. I basically went from fighting the world with a handful of, on behalf of a handful of artists, to being able to do that with, a handful of artists, 3 days a week when we send emails out, and I to our community. And I love that aspect. We being a champion and I guess an ambassador for artists, I think is kind of, in some respects, where it boils down to, whatever facet that comes into play, whether it's management, my role at Noisetrade, or just being a fan, first and foremost.
Dude, absolutely.
I mean, there's things I love that I have no connection to, but I'm happy to, be a bullhorn for regardless. There's something that I think is really, I don't know, just it's really special to find something you really connect with and love, and be able to put that out into the world. Or help it kind of find its way.
Oh my God, absolutely. Facilitating the magic, whatever it is. Right. What does that look like for you on a daily basis? Like, what is your job at Noisetrade? Because I had this romantic notion that, all the Noisetrade people sort of wake up, they go into their super slick offices in Nashville somewhere that I've never been, and they're all just kind of high-fiving, drinking expensive coffee, talking about hipster shit. And then getting to work. And I was like when you at the very top of the hour and you were talking about this, I was like, it kind of makes are you the only person that works remotely, or is everything sort of done remotely? Yeah, I mean,
we've never had an office. We've never worked directly or together in any kind of real capacity. So it's definitely been a very virtual company from the start. And not to say that we aren't connected, and there's numerous tools that make that easy nowadays. So it's not really a necessity. I would say it's a bonus, because you have a variety of a mixture of different people with different perspectives and different places in their life, that I think it's a plus more than a minus. But I mean, on a good day, I spend a lot of my time just trying to discover new things and doing outreach. There was an artist, and I can't even remember her name. She's a UK artist. I actually literally just liked the album cover and checked it out, and just reached out and was like, can we be helpful to you in a way and help you find some fans? I mean, that's what I love doing first and foremost. But the reality of it is, a lot of it's just corralling things and organizing things and making sure everybody's getting done what they need to do in a timely fashion, or if they need help or assistance, or but I try to make it as creative as possible all the time. But I'm also fortunate, I've been doing this long enough that I've developed relationships where good things come to me on a regular basis, where it's not always a hustle, and I think that's just a matter of a benefit of doing good work, hopefully, ideally, but secondly, being a good partner, to a variety of artists. And sometimes that comes in the form of a label that has amazing roster that we get to tap into and utilize to put in front of our community, which is a good mutual thing. And sometimes it's literally an artist that we've worked with over the years that, is doing it all on their own, but has a new record coming out and wants to get back in front of our audience. So it kind of runs the gamut. But, I mean, like any job, a lot of it is just facilitating the reality of it. But I love the fact that it can be creative. We can do things differently and get involved in different ways. I think that makes it kind of extra special in that sense.
Well, I love that. And our experience with you guys in various projects that I've worked on has always been so great and so kind. And
that's kind of cute.
Yeah, well, the cool thing about Noisetrade that I haven't seen from other companies is that, if there's something that's off, or there's something that you don't have, or something is not prepped, or something's not ready, you always get a kind email reminding you to get your shit together. Before an ad goes live, or before new music comes out or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely try to do the best possible work we can. We try to present it in the best possible way. And we try to do it in a humbling and respectful manner as much as possible. I think that speaks to the quality of what Derek did when he started the platform. It also speaks to the quality of the culture. Hopefully we build up not only on this side of the fence, but on the other side within the community itself. Yeah. I think that's really important. I mean, it doesn't have to be that difficult. It just has to be done well and consistently, hopefully. Not everything's a home run, but I like to think that the majority of what we do leaves people with a good impression on both sides of the fence. Like, I think our community appreciates what we put in front of them enough that they trust us enough to check it out, even if they don't know anything about it. And I think artists appreciate us to treat their art with respect and present it in a way that gives them the opportunity to find, new fans and develop and nurture that relationship in a manner that, no other platform really allows for. So I think the combination of that, serving both communities, has served us well.
I think you have an awful lot of goodwill with artists that have worked with you over, God, what is it now, 10 plus years that you guys
a little over 10 years. Yeah.
So there's that, but I also have after I've sort of given the compliment sandwich, let's have real talk for like a minute and a half.
Sure.
About the Noisetrade platform. So like, just really candidly, when you think about Noisetrade moving forward and pivoting and repositioning, just like every company is doing as the music industry is changing so quickly,
right?
As it seems like the value proposition that Noisetrade sort of started out with was the idea of trade, was the idea of an artistic trade of like, you get a download for free. And then we basically sort of data mine for you and then offer that back to the artist, and we create a platform where most of the work is done for you. You can put up your music, figure out what you want your value proposition to customers is, and then do what you want to with that data. And that's awesome. As downloads are becoming obsolete, I wonder what the behind the scenes conversations are at Noisetrade about what the value proposition is to users of the platform, or if it just becomes that like, is Noisetrade transitioning from that old model into more of a model where, you're a curator of art for the people that subscribe to your mailing list? Or is it more about connecting people with music or artists with fans? How do you walk that line? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I have, we're acutely aware of the fact that we're working in an antiquated format, if you will. And we envision streaming for data, 5-6 years ago, when streaming was just in its infancy.
Yeah.
And at that point, if we would have had the resources to launch it at that point, I think it would have been meaningful. But we didn't. We weren't able to launch it until we partnered and were acquired by Pledge Music, and then that allowed us to have the development bandwidth to launch streaming for data. And by the time we did that, it was too little too late, in a sense that I think people were set in their ways and how they wanted to engage with music and where they wanted to do that.
Yeah.
And that's been a real learning experience. The other thing that was really eye-opening for me is I took a sabbatical for about 8 months and went and worked for another company for a while. And when I came back, it was really helpful because up until that point, I was so knee-deep in curating and kind of programming these emails that when I stepped away from it and was able to kind of look on the inside, I was still doing some stuff, but I was far enough away from it that I could look at it from a fan perspective.
Yeah.
I realized that, we built a set of tools that were, really hyper-focused on the artist and their needs. And then we built this community as a byproduct out of that.
Yeah.
But, we always treated that community with a lot of respect, but the community wasn't a driving factor. And I think being away allowed me to come back in with a fresh perspective. And I realized pretty quickly on the heels of the change of the industry moving to streaming and whatnot, that I was like, well, wait a minute. We're actually, the strength of this company is the community. And if we have a strong, robust community that's engaged, artists will always want to engage with that as well and get in front of that. So I kind of flipped the narrative, and for the last couple of years have been focused on how do we evolve that, because I do think it's key in where we go. So streaming wasn't quite the answer. It kind of brought us up to date, but it didn't really change the equation. So I mean, essentially, you could describe Noisetrade a couple different ways. You could say it's, you give away music and you get email address. And that's an artist perspective.
Right.
But the fan perspective, I think, is, that's where I discover and hear about new artists and connect.
Right.
And I think that's really the key element of that. So when I look at the metrics of where we're at nowadays, as everything shifts and kind of contracts, if you will, I look at it and go, well, yeah, it's certain numbers are better than others. But the reality of it is we still have a community that is highly engaged. They care about what we put in front of them. And I think a lot of people get our emails, open them up on their phone, hear about a new artist, and they pop over to Spotify and listen to it, or they pop over to YouTube, or they go to the artist website, or check it out on Facebook or whatever. So I can see that by the number of opens we get and the number of clicks we get.
Right.
The amount of data is collected obviously is dwindling. I'm the same way. I haven't downloaded anything in probably 5 years.
Yeah.
And I have the keys to the kingdom. I could go and download anything off of Noisetrade right now if I wanted to.
Right.
But I'm not really ultimately compelled to do that because I don't want to deal with the hassle of file management.
Right.
That said, we're kind of the last little community of people that do love to download music. And we don't want to steer people away from that, because as it relates to our relationship with Pledge Music, it's really a beautiful relationship in a sense, because I always say that Noisetrade is the try it platform and Pledge is the buy it platform, because they're direct to fan in the work that they do, but it kind of completes the circle. You nurture, you find these new fans, you nurture them along. Eventually you want to try to, see those fans support you in some capacity, and Pledge allows that. But the reality of it is like the people that download and engage on Noisetrade still know what it's like to support an artist directly. And they want to pay attention, and they don't mind being on an email list, and they want to know. So actually I had an artist manager come to me at the beginning of 2018, and he had a brand new artist who had tons of great playlisting on Spotify over the holidays.
Yeah.
And it was a really great experience for them. But, he had this realization where he was like, well, but I don't have an email list. I want to put a record out. She needs to tour. What do I do?
Right.
He's like, I need 500 or 600 email addresses. So I need to get in front of a community of people that care and can provide that. And we answer that equation. And I think we still are able to do that, which I'm thankful for. But to get to the heart of your question, I mean, we're seeing it evolve in a sense where it is more editorial, it's more, it's less data focused in just collecting email. There's other ways we can do that.
Yeah.
Like we're one of the few sites that we don't do this for every client yet, but I'd like to see it go that way. And we're in discussions with a few companies that would help us open the door for this across the platform. But I mean, we'll take a Facebook retargeting pixel and put it on an album page for an artist. And that way, if they're getting 4,000 or 5,000 hits on that, they can build a small little retargeting pool off of it. Yeah. So that keeps to our ethos of data collection. But the reality of it is we're an exposure tool. We get a certain amount of impressions, if you will, out of the few artists that we put our emails and we feature on the website, and that'll drive the needle in different ways. And I would argue that we're just as strong and robust as a lot of kind of publicity platforms, if you will.
Yeah.
We drive better engagement around that, even if we're not collecting the amount of data we used to. Yeah. And for artists in the way that we'd like. At the end of the day, it's, we still have, that's why artists come to us when they have a tour coming up. Like we just featured Joy Williams from the Civil Wars, who we haven't worked with since the Civil Wars for quite a while. But I mean, she has a set of dates coming up and her record doesn't come out until January. So they're like, hey, we should do this and put these tour dates in front of your community. And it was great, So, I mean, I love the fact that we can still serve that purpose. But I do constantly, and that's the other thing too. I mean, I think as a platform, I think we try to be very realistic with our expectations, manage the expectations of the people we work with when it comes to, I'd rather adjust the pricing for our marketing efforts with artists, and so it's realistic and provides a value. And I'd rather be open and say, well, if you're giving away this, I think it'll do that. And I'm not always right, but I look at the platform enough holistically that I can have a pretty good gauge for it. And I'd rather people walk away with a good feeling from working with us, which kind of gets back to our point. I mean, we're fortunate artists continue to come back. We've worked with Drew Holcomb for years on, and there's certain artists and certain labels we just do every release they do and every record they put out. And I love the fact that we can continue to see that relationship evolve. And I think it's a combination of the strength of our community and hopefully the work that we do that continues that thread. But yeah, I mean, it's something that we think about all the time. But to me, my main focus is how do I deliver value back to the community? Because if I do that and do it well, then it's going to add value immediately to the artists that we work with and allow the platform to evolve in a way that puts it in a place that artists want to be a part of it. So it kind of serves both clients, both people, if you will, the artist and the community, if we go that route. So that's kind of where our main focal point is moving forward.
Chris, I really love that. I really, really love those sentiments. I mean, I think in a lot of ways, if there was somebody that was listening to this and was wondering whether or not they wanted to to engage with the Noisetrade platform, I think you've probably sold them on it. I mean, just out of, it's not all bots. Like it's people that really do care about connecting the world with art, about making those sorts of connections. And I really appreciate you being so candid about, the position that you feel like Noisetrade sort of takes in today's current like music business climate. If you were not doing Noisetrade, managing artists, what would you be doing? What would Chris be doing?
I think I would do something similar. I mean, like anybody, I have interest and aspirations and to go in other directions. I love the podcasting sphere. So, obviously we're on a podcast now talking about it. So, I think that's a fascinating outlet. Yeah. That's kind of my interest at the moment. I've done some things with film and television and commercials. I do think that from a music exposure perspective, you could argue a playlist on Spotify definitely drives interest, but it's still it's the new radio, whatever. But I do think that there's emotional connection. Yeah. Component to music being used in film, TV, or advertisement that is really powerful, and that's always something I've always been interested in as well. When you there's something special about taking the right piece of music with the right visual and combining that, it just sets something off. I used to work with an artist, Landon Pig, and he had a song that he wrote that we turned into the publisher, and this guy just kind of loved it and pitched it for De Beers, and it was this huge holiday ad campaign. It musically and lyrically, it just worked for the sentiment they wanted to get across, and it was just like a wonderful piece of art, and it propelled his career. The exposure that you get from that is tremendous, and I really love the idea behind that. I think it's just the number one challenge, and I'll say this to any artist, because sometimes people will be like, with Noisetrade, they'll be like, well, why would I want to give away music? And I was like, well, don't you want new fans? Like, aren't you always interested?
Don't hoard your nothing. That's what I would say. Yeah. Don't hoard your nothing. You've done nothing. You have nothing. No money's coming in. What now?
Yeah, I honestly don't know many artists that don't want to find new fans. That's the hardest thing to do. Yeah. And so I like to think that we're a good vehicle for that. I think film and television and advertisement usage can be a good vehicle for that from an exposure perspective. So that's always something that I'm kind of keen on. Going back to what we were talking about earlier, I think in some capacity I would just be in a band. I think about when I was in college. It was pre-internet days. I'm that old, sadly, but I would have loved to have been able to do a podcast or a blog. Yes. Really, there's something to kind of to create a portfolio almost of what you're into and what you like. It's kind of, there's so many tools for that nowadays, at the beginning stages of a career, if you will, that you can utilize to leverage and build in a way. I think that's really awesome that there's so many outlets in that capacity to find an audience and develop your own brand, if you will. But I don't know, the more I think about it, kind of talking about the artist I manage, and we're fortunate that he'll have a record coming out on Merge, and Merge is great to work with and whatnot. But again, it doesn't, nowadays it's almost like hand-to-hand combat. It's like you just got to figure out how to connect with somebody and try to hold that connection.
You're absolutely right.
There's no magic bullet, if you will, at this point. A Spotify playlist thing is great, drives some revenue. Obviously, it's a lot of exposure, but just like social media, I think that's passive. People next week, that playlist will update and they'll move on to something else. It's really hard to have things have longevity out of that. So I think it's a battle for attention for a moment to hopefully get in front of somebody and hold their attention long enough that it can become meaningful. I think that's the underlying challenge.
Chris, I love that you have that perspective on it. I feel like we've hit on this a few different times in the podcast where we'll get emails from artists, or we'll be talking to artist friends, or be talking to up and coming bands that are we just want a record deal. And I'm like, what, that the record deal is the beginning of a whole new set of problems you're not ready for. Like, and just because you get signed to a record deal doesn't mean that album will come out. It doesn't mean that it'll be what you want it to be. It's like, it's always trading one set of problems for another set of problems. And the thing is, like, when people say that, like, I just want to get signed, I hear that as, I just want to be famous. I just want to go to the front of the line and experience this life that I feel like I deserve, or I feel like that's what my best life looks like. And I just want to say, more often than not, we just end up having this really sort of harsh heart to heart that's like, look, if the whole thing is for you to be famous, then you can act like a jackass on social media and do that in a week. Like, if the point is making an actual connection, is growing a following, is building a community of people with which to share art, then it's going to look a lot more like a day job than you think it will.
No, it's true. Yeah. It's true. Yeah. I mean, I think success has to be defined, for each person individually. But yeah, I mean, there is no shortcut necessarily to that with the substance they're probably looking for. And I think it's less about probably quote unquote success and how you qualify that, like getting a record deal.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it's just wanting to have some community. I think at the end of the day, in a team around you, you want to have a little bit of a comfort zone and support mechanism, married with a community. I mean, I'd rather, if I'm working with an artist, I'd rather have an artist that, this example isn't as relevant nowadays, but maybe 10 years ago, the way I describe it is, I'd rather have an artist that sells 100,000 records over the course of a 20-year career, each time they put a record out, to get to 1 million, rather than an artist that sells 1 million records now and, has to wait 15 years to play the, state fair circuit, and because the expectation is so hard on that, that level of success out of the box, that I think is really hard to maintain that or live up to it, not even creatively, just like as a business component. But if you're just kind of chucking along, doing your thing, you can build on that and see it kind of grow, and it creates an industry around itself and is supportive. And, I think that kind of thing, I guess if you were to put it in more modern terms, like I'd rather not have an artist that's an arena artist out of the gate. I'd rather have an artist that plays in theaters for the course of their career, because that is sustainable. Think about the money that can be earned off of the amazing amount of talent and art and culture you put back into the world doing that, as a career perspective, versus all the money can be earned all at once and then squandered and wasted in a 2 or 3 year time, because you can't, very few artists can repeat that. I mean, there definitely are. I've been fortunate. I happen to know the team that works with Imagine Dragons, and to see them do what they've done, consistently is really exciting, and it's great. And they ask all the right questions and work really hard for it. Same thing with Lumineers, who we were fortunate to work with very early on before they put out their first record. To see them, kind of pull that off on a second record, both creatively and success-wise from industry standards, is phenomenal. And that's no easy feat, and it's because they have a great team around them, that are very level-headed but yet ambitious and smart about the way they go about doing their business. But yeah, there is no, I mean, it's always easier than it looks, or it's always harder than it looks. It's never easy as it looks. It's not like, oh, wow, that's awesome. You made a great record. Now you're just doing, I mean, it's a ton of work, and I think that's what when you're young and naive or new to it, it's hard to have that perspective, and fair enough, I mean, why would you? But I mean, it's not an easy, there's no, as I say, no overnight success, but at the end of the day, I mean, there's no easy path through any of this. I mean, if you just do good work, hopefully it finds its audience at whatever level it does. And it can be confounding. You can have an artist walk in and play in front of 30 people and go, where's everyone? You can have an artist go in and play in front of 30,000 people and have the same anxiety just because they just don't know what to do with it. Right. I mean, there's no rhyme or reason to it too much. I mean, I think you just have to be grateful for your place in all of it. If there's a certain spot you want to work yourself into, then great, be ambitious and try it and see where it goes, but don't lose perspective. I think
it's work in the same way that that relationships are work, because what you're doing is you're not you're trying to not flash in the pan yourself to something. Like the relationship that you have with your audience, you both sort of view each other as these entities. You know, you don't think of every single member of your audience as listening to your music. You sort of create an amalgamation of your audience, and then you speak to them, you write to them, you perform to them in the same way that your audience doesn't see all of the, doesn't see you, all the facets of your life. They view you as a band, as a brand, and having those kinds of relationships. Like my favorite relationships I have with bands are ones that feel like friendship relationships. You know what I mean? Like I have flash in the pan bands that I'll get into for a minute or whatever. And it's just like, oh, well, that's that girl that I dated, or that's that thing that didn't work out, or that's those people that I hung out with for a month and then it didn't really go anywhere. But like the bands that have that relationship, like a best friend, like getting a phone call from a friend that you haven't heard from in 6 months and picking up that conversation just like, you just got off the phone 30 seconds ago. Those are the things that people enjoy about being human with each other. And they're also the things that they enjoy about the relationship with bands. Like they want to feel like, or at least for me, I want bands, as a fan of bands, that I can check out their latest album, having not really cared about them or thought about them for 5 years, but sort of I have that reason to go back and listen to whatever it is new that they have out. And I'll actually save emotional energy because I want to be invested in what they have to say, because I've grown up with them. I've watched how they've evolved. Maybe I've followed different stories because I'm interested in the narrative of their life to some degree. Like those are all things that I think are really, really important factors to the fan artist relationship that not a lot of people talk about. More often than not, it just turns into like, well, the metrics, and you need to make sure you're posting it, and it's social media, and it's having everybody on your team and all cylinders firing at the same time. And I think a lot of times we forget like that the most important thing, like I just need to be reminded that my favorite band exists. You know what I mean? Like I'm in that demographic of like, Weezer put out a new record. Just tell me about it. I'll make time. Like, yeah.
And that's the other thing that's really challenging, I think, in a sense, like how much do any of us, even as like rampant music fans, have the capacity to soak in and get to know a variety of artists. I mean, the average person probably only has the capacity to maybe be a huge devoted fan to maybe 4 or 5 artists. And, some of those are set at certain ages in life, to your point, that you wanted as venture back to at time to time. I mean, I'm guilty of that too. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, I told my wife, I was like, I go to a lot of shows, and I get to go to a lot of shows, which I'm very fortunate for, but I saw Phil Collins was coming to town. I was like, I got to buy a ticket. I got to go to that show. He probably will never tour again. And I've never seen him play. And it was totally a nostalgic
He'll be
trip.
Dead soon.
Well, not that. I mean, to his, credit, I mean, he does have a really bad foot. He can't play anymore. He has back problems. I mean, he sat in a chair all night, walked out in a cane. I mean, after the show, it reminded me, this is probably what it would have been like to see like Sinatra in like the 80s, it kind of, towards the end of his career, in a sense where he's basically singing these songs from the 40s and 50s and 60s. There's nothing wrong with these songs. They're classics and they're great. But it's a total nostalgic trip. I mean, it's not necessarily, something that's maybe current or relevant, but that said, I mean, it was so good. It was really great. But I mean, he's like one of those guys that fall in like my top 5 or top 10. It's like, I'm going to go out of my way to do that.
Dude, I still monthly will put on Face Value and No Jacket Required. I mean, because I'm actually kind of a Phil Collins fan. I understand. Yeah. He seems like kind of a shitty person the more that you read about his life, but I'm a huge fan of his music and kind of always have been. It's that was one of those bands for me that like you realize, oh, this was Phil Collins. You know what I mean? Like you become cognizant that artists are artists, and you're like, oh, I've heard this guy my entire life, and now I have a name for it.
Right. Well, it's funny because I saw him on a Sunday, and then on Thursday before I saw Foo Fighters. So in a way, I was like, wow, I'm seeing 2 amazing drummers and songwriters.
What a charmed life you lead.
Well, no, I mean, I'm not trying to, but it was an interesting perspective because I'm like, there's a lot of people that love Foo Fighters. They've been going for 25 years now, which is hard to believe. And the last time I saw them was on their first tour when they opened up for Mike Watt before they put a record out shortly after Kurt's passing. So it was one of those things where I had that kind of perspective. I was like, wow, I haven't seen these. Last time I saw them, they were playing in front of 400 people in a club, and here they are, playing in front of 20 something thousand people in an arena.
Yeah.
Anyway, all that to say, it's like, here's Survivors that kind of came out of, as a musician, out of a very popular band into, in Dave's case, created his own band, but nonetheless, he's kind of the primary driver in that band. And then Phil kind of doing, kind of almost double duty between Genesis and his own solo career for several years. It's exhausting to even try to track, especially in the early and mid 80s.
Yeah.
But anyway, you look at that and it's like, that's really brilliant. How you could argue the merits of what they do as a fan, maybe one way or the other. But I mean, my God, these people just, it would have been easy for Dave to go, screw it, I'm done. I was in the biggest band in the world and it all, it ended horribly and I'm done, and never evolve, and I don't know, there's something about that that's really endearing. And I'll have to say too, I mean, watching both shows, but in particular with, hearing some of those older songs, I mean, Phil joked about it. He's like, yeah, here's a song that was a hit back in the 80s. It's like 30 years ago, but it doesn't diminish the power of like the beauty of that music, any more than, hearing Sinatra sing a song from the 50s that, he didn't even write, but boy, he understood enough to interpret.
Because it hits you at a time in life, you established an emotional connection with it. It means something for you. It's a memory. It's a car ride. It's a breakup. It's a moment. It
is. And I think there's a really beautiful thing in all that to appreciate. But, you're challenged now more than ever, because you do have at your disposal, you can hear anything you want to hear. Like I could tell you about an awesome artist I love, this guy Eric Matthews, who put records out on Sub Pop, and tell you to go listen to My Morning Parade, and you can pull it up and listen to it right now and be blown away by it. That's what you have to as a new artist to compete against. You have my personal memory of that song, hearing it randomly or thinking about it, and then going to it and reliving that versus the probably 20 albums I earmarked in Apple Music today that I either liked because I either heard something about, or that cover caught me, or is in a genre I like that I'm going to eventually go back and listen to. And, will I get there? Will I ever even bother? I don't even know. I mean, do I have the time and capacity to do it? I don't know. But it's that's what you're up against as an artist, any artist, arguably, but certainly a new artist. Yeah. So I don't know. It's a challenge. It's definitely a challenge. We're not in the world of supply and demand. There's certainly a supply out there. You have to create the demand on some level, and that's when it comes to art, but especially music. Yeah. It requires some sort of emotional connection to kind of be had. The beautiful thing about music is it doesn't take your full attention. Like, I got up Sunday morning and I went to the library actually last week, and I got, sadly, this is the only way to kind of do it nowadays is, I grabbed a CD box set of John Coltrane and Miles Davis when their final tour together in 1960. Yeah. And not that I was going to play it on my CD player. I pulled it up on my phone and threw it to my stereo and listened to it, but I just wanted to read the liner notes.
Yes.
But, which you can't really do unless you get a physical copy of it nowadays. Yeah. But point being is like, that sets a tone, and I can do that, and I can make breakfast and carry on a conversation with my family and still in the back of my head subconsciously listen to this amazing music. Yeah. It's not like I, sitting down and absorbing Game of Thrones or something. It's like, I can't.
Right.
You can't, or reading a book, which requires my undivided, complete, focused attention. I think there's a beauty in music. There, you can have a wider palette of it because you can do other things with it while you're experiencing it on different levels. But I also sat down last Friday night and pulled up the new Julian Baker, Phoebe Bridgers, and Lucy Dacus EP. That is I think is fantastic, and like to sit down and soak that in and like sit in a chair just listen to it, was a highlight of my day, So, it just depends. It depends on the format, it depends on the time and the focus that you can put towards something, but it's to get there. It's a special thing to be able to leapfrog into that and then hopefully connect with it and hold that connection over time.
I absolutely love that. It sounds like you have such a special analytical mind. You have such an ability to be able to appreciate so many different facets of things, and also to take, these tasks or these jobs that would be time consuming and energy consuming for a lot of people, and sort of figure out how to pull the right amount of joy out of it, how to not necessarily spin it, but how to turn the gem and see it in a new way. And I really, as you're talking, I'm really appreciating that about you. I know that we have totally gone the time for the show, and I know you have a family to get back to, but I wanted to ask you one more thing because we have a ton artists that listen to the show. We have a lot of people that have either followed our career or are singer-songwriters themselves, or that know bands, that just love band culture, that love all these different things that we're talking about, the connection, the pixie dust, the elevated moments.
Right.
What would you, from your vantage point up in the Noisetrade Tower, looking down over the music industry, what would you say to up-and-coming bands who want to be able to create a sustainable career for themselves? Because there are a lot of them out there. What would you say to them to sort of move them to the front of the line, to where you can say, look, don't spend 5 years of your career figuring this out. Go ahead and just assume these things. Here's what I can tell you by seeing a lot of bands doing it, a lot of bands come and go. What would that look like? What would that advice look like from you?
Yeah, I mean, assuming they're making art that is moving people, and they can tell that, like there's an element of awareness.
That's
around
a great
that,
benchmark.
Right? Yeah, I mean, that's a kind way of saying, make sure your music doesn't suck first and foremost, because it has to be better than what you're hearing, and you need to hear that from people that are a bit random and not like emotionally, personally connected to you. Because while those opinions are valid too, they're not necessarily always as telling. But I think the important thing is just focus on whatever you can do to make a long-term connection. Whatever mechanism allows that. You aren't. There was a time maybe when, you'd make records and make CDs, a physical product, if you will, and there had intrinsic value within that physical product. You could argue that MP3s had intrinsic value for a moment too. But the reality of it is music nowadays does not have any intrinsic value. It only has emotional value. So you have to make that connection. You can't force that connection. You can somehow and sometimes nudge it and plant seeds to see it kind of come to fruition. But when you get a moment of that, you show up in a town and there's 20 people out in the audience and the rest of the room is empty, don't ignore those 20 people. Make a connection. And part of this is, by I mean, quote unquote connection, that means, surprise somebody with an answer and response on social media, go out and talk to people after a show, try to be, I guess, available, if you will, and engaging beyond what you do with your art, because people are buying into you wholly, not just the music or one song. If they're going to stick with you over time, that's really the connection that needs to happen. So I think, that, and what do you have, 100 people, or you have 1,000 people, or 10,000 people, or 100,000 people? I mean, all of it grows and builds as you go. But the reality of it is there's something special between that connecting point. And think of it like, there's a great TED Talk actually from this guy who used to work at Topspin and Twitter for a while. I can't even begin to pronounce his last name, but you could Google it and find it. But essentially, think like a fan. And he gives some good examples around that. But the reality of it is anyone working in this industry or an artist themselves need to constantly think like a fan. What drives you? I mean, I know a few artists that aren't really music fans, but for the most part, most of them are on some level. Even if their discography is really small, and not very broad and focused, there's something they connect with in the same way that you need people to connect with their art. And if you can think like that and take that always into perspective, that'll immediately leapfrog you further along. Another harsh way of saying it too is your music has no value except for that emotional component, and it certainly has no physical any monetary value until that connection is made. And thankfully, we live in a world where that monetary value can go anywhere. It can be the sky's limit. And you can't ignore the people that don't spend any money on your career, because they might be your biggest evangelist. But you also have the ability to tap into people that are rampant. And some of those people happen to have a lot of disposable income and want to be supportive and be a patron of what you do, and embrace that too. But it's not as simple as when you put a record out or a CD out or put a record up on iTunes, and a fan could only spend $10 or $15 That was it. Or they could buy a ticket to a show and buy a t-shirt. That was it.
Yep.
Nowadays, they can do so much more to support you. So, be open-minded to all of that. Understand that, your career is going to probably be fueled financially by a small percentage. And by small, I mean 1, 2, 5, maybe if you're lucky, 8 to 10% of your fans. And the other, like 90 to 95% are going to just be there to be supportive in their own way. But that doesn't mean you should ignore those people. Yeah. And there's tons of artists that I love and evangelize that I don't necessarily, support in the way that I'm able to or would like to monetarily. That doesn't change the fact that it's not important to me in my life. And I think I'm in a position in the industry I work in where I can provide value in different ways. But regardless, I think it's fascinating. Anytime I go to a show, going back to the Phil Collins show, I mean, I bought a ticket out from a scalper out front for half the price of the ticket value. I go and sat next to the guy who sold it to the scalper who got it to me. But anyway, I'm sitting in there and that dude spent $150 on this ticket. And I'm like, man, that's fascinating to me that somebody would spend that much money on a show, and be that supportive and not think twice about it. We did talk about how crappy the ticket buying experience is, and that's a whole nother conversation to be had. Yes. But the reality of it is, the industry is doing no favors to its fans when it comes to the experience of buying tickets to shows. But the reality of it is that people will be supportive and they'll spend and pay a premium for an experience. Yes. In a memory. And I think that there's something really powerful in that. So anytime I walk into a club and I'm looking around and I can do the math in my head, and I can think about it, but I'm like always fascinated, almost down to analyzing each individual person. And I'm looking at going, man, what brought you here? Like, how did you get here?
You're always at work, Chris. You're always at work.
Well, kind of, but it's fascinating. It's really interesting to me to see, and I have a huge amount of respect for people because it's not easy. If I go to a show at the Palace and I'm there with 2,400 people to see like Wilco or something or Punch Brothers or somebody like that, I'm looking around the crowd and going, okay, most of these people probably have families. So they're probably paying $10, $15 an hour, for a babysitter. They probably blew, $60 on dinner, another $15, $20 for parking and $100, say $100, $160 on tickets, whatever. And it's like, man, that's not, that's no easy feat for any family. No, it's not. I mean, it's an investment for an experience, and you have to kind of honor that in a way. In my opinion, I think it's. So anyway, think about it that way, and think about what you can do to make those kind of long-term connections, and don't get rattled too much by how many people like you on Facebook or how many people are spinning, or playing your music on Spotify. It's like you could have 100 people that are just rampant fans and live off of that on a moment to build from, and that's all it takes. I guess there's that whole paradigm of 1,000 true fans, to kind of like build a career from. I mean, that metric might change and shift, but there's a lot of truth in that kind of mindset. It's like you don't have to have a strong association of a label behind you nowadays. You don't have to have be able to sell 500 tickets to a show per se. I mean, you can do a lot within the margins if you're making meaningful connections.
I think you have to have a gospel worth telling. I think you have to have an experience or a connection or some type of neural net, right, that you're tapping into, that you're like, I want to talk about this band. I want to tweet to my friend who I think would really like this, or I want to let somebody know. Like, you become an evangelist of sorts just out of this cool, like, human connection. And it could be just something as innocuous as like, Ninja Sex Party just put out a stupid video that we're going to go watch, and we're going to see, some funny jokes, and it's going to be kind of crass, and I have friends that love that, and I'm going to share that. Or it could be, look, I'm going through some shit in my life right now, and I just happened upon this song, and the song said to me, I see you, I feel with you, I've felt that before, and I felt not so alone. And that connection is just as meaningful. It's like, anyway, that's my drug, I feel like, is.
I think most people, music, that's what fuels music fans. And I think really that's what artists have to tap into. And it's hand-to-hand combat. It's one by one. It's, for most artists, it's not an easy path. If you're doing good work and people are reacting to it, be thankful for that and continue to build on it. I mean, there's no shortcut, no easy way around it, really, for most people.
That's awesome. Chris, thank you so much for spending your Friday afternoon with me.
Sure.
Because you've given so much cool information. I hope at some point we get to cross paths again in the 11-verse.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thanks for inviting me.
11 Life is a production of Rock Candy Recordings and Rock Candy Media. Want more shows like this one? Get your shit together and subscribe to 11